Hey everyone, let's start healing. I'm Adrianne Murchison, and welcome to episode 100 of the Let's Start Healing podcast. Yes, 100. I am very proud and excited to bring you this 100th episode. We have more in common than we think, and what we have in common can change the world. For this episode, I am joined by my nephew and podcaster, John Russ Murchison, who lives in Virginia, and he has probably joined me for 5 or 6 episodes of this podcast since we started. I thought it was less than that, but in going back and looking and listening to some of the previous episodes, I'm like, wow, he's been on here more than a few times. And so he and I really just chat about life and experiences and what different things meant to us along the way. And as we weave in clips from some of the previous episodes, I think that you will really enjoy it because he is super deep. And he and I talk all the time and get into some really fruitful conversations. And so we're just bringing it to this platform and helping you to get acquainted with Let's Start Healing. Maybe you came to know Let's Start Healing around episode 50 or 60 or 45. And I'm going to share some early episodes with you and some episodes that you might have missed, some outlier episodes, and conversations about some of those outlier episodes that I recorded. It's just good, really good food. So I hope that you enjoy it. Please let me know what you think. Please share this episode, share Let's Start Healing with at least one person that you know who you think this would resonate with. Shiloh, my dog in the background, I don't know if you can hear him, but he's seconding that. All right, Shy. So what else? Is there something else? Please subscribe. Please subscribe to the podcast. Yeah, Shiloh's like, subscribe. Yes. The podcast is available on traditional platforms, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, iHeart. So let's get to it. Let me bring in my nephew, bring you to the conversation that we had. Let's get started. Let's start healing.
Oh,
Okay,
man.
welcome, little Russell.
Hey, how you doing?
Oh gosh, I'm sorry. I said little Russell.
Who cares, man? Who cares?
You are not little. You're grown ass man.
Yeah,
Welcome.
that's the part where I say my ego doesn't matter. I could be little Russell, it's fine.
Exactly. And for this important episode, I did remember to hit record because
Definitely,
sometimes I can forget.
definitely. That's the most important part.
Right. So thank you so much for being here with me. And this is the episode where I'm looking back at earlier podcast episodes of Let's Start Healing and just want to reflect on what this podcast is about and what we've touched on. And I'm happy and excited to be doing this with you by my side. So thank you.
That's cool. I'm happy. I'm honored. I think it's great.
Yeah.
So, like, what made you want to start a reflections episode at this time?
Well, to be honest with you, I get inspired from a lot of different podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
And I was watching The Pivot, and I have to cough, excuse me.
It's all good.
Excuse me. I was watching The Pivot, and they did an episode reflecting, and normally I don't find those types of things interesting, but I thought it was very creative the way that they did it, and it really inspired me. And I do want people to know about some of the early episodes that they might not have been familiar with, that they might not be familiar with. And even going back and listening to some of them, I'm just like, oh, wow. I mean, people are getting deep and they're really talking spirituality and their relationship with God and what their struggles are. And that's really the ultimate thing that I want to get into with the podcast.
Definitely. That's cool. I agree. I caught the pivot episode as well. And of course you were the one that kind of like nudged me to even watch it, because when it first premiered, I was like, I don't really want to see it. But it was done in a different way. And I didn't even think about that when it came to the inspiration for doing this episode. But yeah, I think it's pretty cool. I think your podcast is one of those type of podcasts that's very niche and it has a lot of substance. Um, I feel like a lot of times when you hear people talk about spirituality, a lot of people may think religion first, and so therefore they feel that it's going to be packaged a certain way. And I just like how free you are with your guests, or by yourself, or however you do it, you do it in a very organic and authentic way. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
So just reflecting back, I mean, you always got to start at the beginning. I remember your first episode was with Parrish, and I really enjoyed that episode. Is it any highlights or just anything about her in general that comes to mind?
Yes. And you know what? She was the first episode I aired. She wasn't my first interview,
Oh,
but my first interview was a friend. I'm realizing this as we speak. My first interview was my friend Genesesia,
okay.
but who's also very spiritual and just in her own space. She's a healer, just
Hmm.
like Parrish is a healer. And Parrish is a person who is similar to how you think of me,
Hmm.
very open. She has a uh, spiritual group of women that's international that
Okay.
she's had for well over 10 years, maybe about 13 years.
Hmm.
And she is just a person that's just real fluid with her spirituality. She's very open. She just cares about the love of
Hmm.
God and the love of spirit, whatever it looks like. It's just so, I feel like maybe you got a sense of her, I hope, and
Yeah.
how much I've talked about her.
Hmm.
And just to show you, say a little bit about her. So I'm in the Atlanta, Georgia area, and she was living here and
Hmm.
she moved to Spain. I want to say like the end of 2020. She moved to Spain
Oh,
for
wow.
2 years and she decided, I don't want to live in the US anymore. I don't like the division here. I don't like what's going on. She has three kids, I believe. Two of them are adults, but one is a younger daughter.
Hmm.
And she wanted her daughter to be exposed to other aspects of the world that are not about divisiveness and hate. And so that she and her husband and her daughter, they moved to Spain for 2 years and they moved back recently to Georgia. And now they
Oh,
live in a city, an area called Serenbe, which is also it's an area that's hard for me to describe. I actually have not been there, but it's not far from where I live at all.
oh,
But
okay.
it's very it's a spiritual, open, organic place where people, I believe, like grow, their own food,
Oh,
and
wow.
they have just a lot of authenticity. There's a lot of authenticity about the place.
That's
And
cool.
so, I mean, that's just the type of person she is. I'm not even touching on just the beauty of Parrish. And so I thought she was so ideal to be the first episode to air.
Yeah.
I just decided a year ago, I said, you know what? I just want to always be a servant of God and come from a place of love, compassion, and service. In order for me to live my life with these qualities, I have to see what can I do to bring out these qualities, because being mindful of what I hear, of what I read is
Mm-hmm.
extremely important to me to conserve my energy. And every morning when I wake up, I have my quiet time of meditation and devotion. And so I'm taking that vibration throughout the day. And when I step out, I say, you know what? Every single person I come out and interact with, I just want to be a servant of God.
Right.
How can I be an expression of that, right? even playing soft music in the morning really sets the tone of what you want to carry out throughout the day.
Yes.
So, what I see happening is people are turning on the news first thing in the morning. They're frustrated. We're so divided as a country now. So they're taking that frustration and it kind of carries out with them throughout the rest of the day. So again, the question is what I am doing or what I am reading, is it adding to the betterment of the world? Is it adding to the betterment of who I am? Is it improving me as an individual? How can I strive to be better than I was yesterday? Or am I just going to be consumed with all the media? Because media never really, I feel like media is so biased, right?
Yes.
And so sometimes we don't watch or listen to the good stories because that's not what makes media, right? And so again, to have that connection with my divine source, I choose to create my own environment, again, of what I read and what I watch.
Yeah, I definitely thought, just the conversation that you all had, it just set the tone for how you wanted it to be. Like when you explained it to me, it felt that way, So I think that's pretty cool. And just thinking back to what you said about 2020, it's so crazy how the tone of like our country was so different then. It's like I
Yes.
almost don't think about it in that way, just because the day to day now, everything just seems so quiet from a political standpoint and
You think
everything.
so? Wow. That's
Yeah, I mean, I
nice.
do. I mean,
That's
I
nice.
do. I mean, not to get political or anything, but I mean, just the temperament of both presidents are just vastly different.
True.
And in our previous president, it was an angst in the country. So
Yeah.
that's the first thing that I think about is like the division. No matter which side you were on, people were really either for, or against in that way. And it doesn't feel that way now. I mean, you can always find that, but that didn't feel like the everyday tone when you turned on the news or anything like that. It doesn't feel that way
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. And I don't want to get ahead of
Yeah.
ourselves, but I think I'm thinking as you're talking that George Floyd's death probably shifted a lot of things where even if people are so starkly different in their views,
Mhm.
they're a little more tolerant of each other and
Yeah.
a little more mindful of we're both human. We both have people that we love in our lives. We're
Mhm.
just on different sides of the fence ideology, when
I,
it comes
I,
to ideology.
I would hope so. I mean, I would hope
Yeah.
so, but you never know. You always got those pockets of people that just are different.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
say it that way.
So true.
Yeah.
So true.
Another episode that you had that was pretty cool was the one with Randy. Was there anything in particular that you could think about or that you remember that you wanted to speak on?
Yes. So Randy, and I'm not saying his last name, and I didn't say Parrish's last name, but her last name is Hatub. It's
Hmm.
hard to pronounce her full name.
Hmm.
But Randy is we decided not to share his name only because he is partially in a 12-step group
I
where
remember.
they, respect anonymity.
Hmm.
But actually, when I went back and listened to the episode, it's not that Randy had a alcohol problem or anything like that, but he was just so fascinating. He, excuse me, Randy talks about how he was living in LA with his family. He's a
Hmm.
criminal defense attorney that he deals with appeals and people post conviction type cases.
Hmm.
And he was very successful, really, really successful, the way he explained it. And then they moved to Atlanta, and a lot of things shifted in his life. And he came to realize that he was really absorbed in his ego. And he explains it so beautifully.
Yeah.
And he was just really absorbed in his ego. And he realized that he needed to take a look at himself and that he was in a lot of pain.
Hmm.
And so then that's when he decided, and I'm really shrinking all of this,
Yeah.
but he decided to get into a 12-step group, and that really had him dive into his spirituality and himself. But he talks a lot about just the pain he was feeling and
Hmm.
how he had to really take a look at himself. And one thing that really struck me was how he was saying how in LA he was really well known and he was on different TV shows, how you see attorneys as analysts on shows, or he would be written up. And he said he remembered looking at himself in the mirror and saying, wow, you've really arrived. And and he was just, and when he said it, I thought, well, what's wrong with that? But he was saying that he was coming from a real superficial point of view, and that his wife had told him that he was spending less and less time with the family, and she didn't know if their marriage was going to survive. And then she got a job in Atlanta, and he knew that it was important for him to agree to move, and that his family was important to him. And he didn't right away, he didn't find as much professionally the opportunities that he expected to find. And it just slowed him down and caused him to sit down and pause. And it's just it's a very powerful episode that really gets into the kind of things that I love to talk about. And he talks about pain. He brings that up over and over again, just like this feeling inside he wasn't feeling right, and just wanting to deal with that. And he did. And so just that's what I like to talk about, because it gets to what so many people walk around feeling every day, and then it gets to the healing part of it as well.
I think getting into Al-Anon, going to that first Al-Anon meeting, and all of a sudden being introduced to this idea of a higher power, a God of my understanding, foreign to me, but I was in such pain, I was willing to even entertain the idea. And I think that's where my spiritual journey really started.
And that had to be perfect in a way, because it wasn't trying to push anything on you, any real ideology, right?
So that's exactly right. I would have resisted any dogmatic ideology. Frankly, I would have resisted just any idea of God or a higher power, unless the circumstances of my life forced me to it. In a way, I've heard AA speakers and Al-Anon speakers talk about alcoholism being a blessing, because what is a blessing except for something that leads you back to God, where you came? So in a way, the fact that I had some alcoholism in my family, and the fact that I had hit this strange bottom was such a blessing for me, because it just led me in a whole new direction that there's no way I would have done myself.
I'm wondering about that first day. Like, did you feel just some relief? Did something sort of just make you relax as you were listening to people, or do you remember what it felt like?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, and that's an interesting question, because a lot of people will come into that first meeting, they'll hear the exact thing they needed to hear. See, I got into Al-Anon because I figured, well, I know 12 steps, they talk about God and higher power, so I need to find a way to get this, whatever this God, higher power is, to get me my career back to the way it's supposed to, like to get everything back to the way it was. So all of a sudden I get to that first meeting, and they're talking about letting go. They're talking about surrendering even more.
You're like, what the what?
I'm like, no, that's not why I'm here. I'm here to sort of, like, to the extent I'm even willing to believe in a God, I want that God to be kind of like my genie, who's going to sort of just get everything back. And I'm not hearing that.
Oh my goodness. So what were you doing in LA?
So, for my profession. So I am by profession a criminal defense attorney. I do post-conviction work. So I help people who have already been convicted of crimes try to appeal their convictions or to try to get out. You know what? I'd started my own practice. I was doing really well. I was on the top of the world. I did a lot of news. I was on national news programs. I had the respect of my colleagues. I was getting written up in like the top lawyers in LA Magazine. I mean, this was the height of my ego. In fact, I don't know if I've ever told anybody this, but about a month before we moved to Atlanta and I hit that bottom, I remember looking in the mirror this was the height of the ego. And I remember looking at him and being like, yeah, man, you have arrived. Like you are, Rainey, you are at the top of your game. And as they say, pride cometh before a fall, you know?
And I'm like, what's wrong with saying that? But you weren't in the right place when you were saying
it was all just, it was all external. That's the thing. It was like all of my self-worth and any kind of love I could feel for myself, and I didn't realize this at the time, was all outside of me. There was nothing. I was empty inside. And so my happiness and my well-being and serenity, if you even want to use that, was all dependent on how many people were giving me attention, how many people were liking me. Oh, did I win this case? Oh, I can feel good about myself. Oh, I lost this case. I can't feel good about myself. Oh, I just got an award. Now I can feel good about myself. And so everything was external.
So if you don't mind my asking, how did that affect your family life?
It's very interesting, especially people who are like very successful from a professional standpoint. Even most recently, like Tom Brady, you know, you saw all of this success, and then it's like his home life started to crumble, you know, respectfully speaking, it started to crumble. And a lot of times I think that's where things get tricky for people. So whenever somebody can come up out of that, it's very powerful, because so many people relate to that, men and women. You know, if you're in a professional aspect, you sacrifice so much, whether it's love or time with your family, your kids, or whoever you may love, and people come and go, and then you look back at your life and you thought you were doing well, like when he said, when he looked in the mirror and said, I arrived. You know, that was speaking specifically to that one goal that he had. But little did he know it was so many things on the inside that he would have to work on or confront. So that's very, so very deep, you know?
Yeah. It's so funny you mentioned Tom Brady. I mean, I used to, you know, I grew up obviously hating the Patriots.
Right.
From where, you know, I come from, Buffalo, but I had to come to really respect Tom Brady as a human being. And so I really think about what you're talking about. And you know, his unfortunately, it can't be easy to have your life on your personal life,
not at
all, broadcast the way it was, you know, over the last year. And then we already know from other athletes that it's hard to retire. And so everything just feels, you know, awkward. And so, you know, I just really feel for him. Yeah.
It's difficult. I mean, I think that like what you said, like plays a big role into everything that happens in life. Like, I'm one of those type of people. I like to appreciate greatness in whatever field it is. And so therefore I can separate like fandom or like not liking a particular player or team, but respecting the craft of what's going on, because we're lucky enough to witness it. Like I wasn't lucky enough to see Muhammad Ali, you know what I mean, and like perform and just go through that journey with them. But I was able to see Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Tom Brady, Floyd Mayweather. And so I always know how to separate the two. But it's definitely something that comes with its downfalls, its pitfalls, and people just look at them like they're so great. You know what I mean? I think a lot of people don't understand like the price of success. So again, that's why an episode like this is so deep, because I think everybody can relate to that on any level.
Yeah. And as you're saying that, I sort of feel grateful and appreciative of the athletes like that we know, like we mentioned the Pivot, and there's other podcasts that where they're able to transition, or even if it's just broadcasting, where they're able to transition to something else that must be really helpful.
Definitely.
To them. Yeah.
A lot of them become more famous for that. But like now it's different than say even when like Terry Bradshaw may have done it. You know what I mean? Now there's a everyday effect as opposed to just like Sunday for football. We see Shannon Sharp every day if we choose to, Monday through Friday. And others. So it's definitely cool.
Yeah. Gosh, I am so mad at myself that I didn't think to look up this name. Who is the coach? They were father and it's
you talking about Buddy Ryan, Rex Ryan, and Rob Ryan?
Didn't we see a doc with him on it?
With Buddy?
Yeah, and he was like it was a doc. It wasn't, I don't know that the doc was about him, but he was sort of it might have been because wasn't he the defensive coach for the Bears?
He was
Something like
definitely
that.
the defensive coach for the 85 Bears. You know what I
Right.
mean?
And
Which
so
people
that's what the doc was
okay.
about. And
Was
so
it
then
like a
they
30
were
for 30?
maybe.
That might have been what it was. Because I was trying to think. I was like, I don't remember like a specific doc with them, but 30 for 30
Maybe.
makes sense.
And it's just that, when they showed him, it looked like he was alone.
Mhm.
And I just felt sad because I felt like, after all of that, and then you're just the way that it just appeared. I don't know
Mhm.
what the world, I don't know what it is. I don't know
Yeah.
what it was, but it just looked like he just looked alone.
Yeah.
He looked alone. That's
I
all.
think a lot of times in like any profession, but specifically like coaching, people become obsessive. And that obsession seems to give you everything you need in a positive way when you're successful. But it's like anything else. If you're obsessed or you're obsessive about something, it's gonna come out. Like that's the negativity will come out. So
Yeah.
I mean, that's obvious, you know what I mean? So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's tough. But I was thinking of another episode, and you had episode 34 with Shaheen.
Yeah.
How was that episode when you reflect and think back on it? I see you smiling. What comes to mind?
So first of all, before we talk today, and I was listening back to some episodes, and it was so hard to not call Randy and not call Shaheen. And I said, I'm gonna wait till after we record this.
That's a
I don't
good
know what
idea.
I'm gonna say.
That's a good
And
idea.
but she was one of my favorite episodes. She was similar to Parrish.
Mhm.
She, in addition to her regular profession, which I forgot what it was, but she is also a healer, like an energy healer.
Mhm.
And so she would, I think she would work with people who might be experiencing some kind of physical illness.
Mhm.
And this episode went into her own journey through cancer and through breast cancer. And
Mhm.
it was amazing. She was just amazing. And
Yeah.
she was reflecting on just her journey, how
Yeah.
she dealt with it, how she dealt with it with her family, what she learned. One of the things that she talked about was discussing it with her younger son and how she was explaining it to him and her journey. I'm finding out because I have a friend who's going through that journey now.
Mhm.
And that, you can have different approaches to treatment. For
Right.
example, I know one person who told me that they didn't have any chemotherapy, or any surgery. I think the person had a lumpectomy, if I'm not mistaken. But my friend did some chemotherapy. The idea was chemotherapy, surgery, radiation. Now she's not going to have to do the radiation. So chemotherapy, surgery. So Shaheen did no chemotherapy first. She did the surgery, but she
Mhm.
also had more than one surgical procedure.
Mm.
And, she talks about just, like I said, talking to her son about it and her asking her about, is she going to lose her hair? And, just things that a child would ask. And she said no, because she wasn't going through the chemotherapy. And then she talked about just the identity of, womanhood and being in the pain and being able to give herself permission to feel what she feels and say what she needs to say, to another person if she's frustrated or angry or, just hurting,
Yeah.
emotionally, just, giving herself permission to show up the way she needed to show up. And I'm talking the way I'm talking, but
Mhm.
she just talks in such a gentle way. I mean,
Right. Right.
it's just I'm telling you, I could talk to her. I told you the other day, I could talk to her for weeks. Like there were so many things that we talked about. Like I felt like I didn't have enough time. I
Right.
definitely didn't have enough time. Just an incredible, incredible person. And in fact, I mentioned I have a friend going through a journey now, and I was telling her about the episode and how I want to send her the episode, and their journeys are not identical.
No.
But I still felt like they could relate. And then even, me, thank God, to this point, I haven't had to deal with anything like that, but it's just, there's so much. I mean, she is a true healer. I named the episode Wounded Healer because she is a true healer.
I think I was stubborn. And I think my journey was, I think God was trying to break me enough to allow me to allow my vulnerable side to be seen more.
Yeah.
When I talk about my journey now, I don't sugarcoat it where I was strong, I got through it. I'm okay with saying I didn't like that part of my pain. It hurt. It hurt me emotionally. It hurt me deep. It hurt me physically. And then slowly you begin to welcome it because I found gratitude through it. I found gratitude in places I never thought I would find. I found gratitude in my loneliness because I began to listen to myself more. I never had time to listen to myself before. When I spent years being a therapist, my patients were everything to me. I would be with them. I would support them. I would work with them in any way possible to help them through their chemo or radiation, through their stress, through their, insomnia. And I loved that I could be a listener. I loved that I could be able to give them tools to support their journey. When I went through this, one thing that I never had that I gained was finding a way to give somebody permission to feel how they want to feel. That was different for me. Giving somebody permission to feel angry or sad or frustrated is really different when you realize you need that permission also. So when you're with somebody and they feel like that, you don't have to fix that part. That's them going through the journey of healing. That's part of the healing.
Yeah.
Not part of the brokenness.
Right. You're just standing in empathy for them.
And I used to think that brokenness was like that, but that's actually part of the healing.
You used to think that had to be fixed. They needed to be comforted.
Yes.
But comforting is just letting them be
right
in their space.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's okay to feel like that because you have to, externalize that to get past it. For myself, I was really confused when I would feel broken, that I thought I was being weak. I felt like I needed to be healed when I didn't realize that brokenness was part of the journey to be healed. So I began to embrace that more. And, pain was part of my healing.
Yeah. You know what? I love that. That's insightful for me personally, because if I'm upset or if I'm hurting, I've always been good about isolating myself.
Yeah.
But it's been a thing of, I have to isolate myself. I mean, I prefer to do that, but I also, a sense of me feels, I have to do that because I don't have permission to be something else.
Right.
Around other people.
Right. You have to be this happy, strong
exactly.
figure in front of everybody else.
Yeah.
Or you may come across as weak, and you think that part of you is weak. And I think that's a stigma we have when it comes to mental health, where you don't show that side because people will judge that side.
Right.
Yeah.
In whatever way they want to.
Yeah.
The other day, I had a new insight, and I was wondering if you feel this way. There's one thing to forgive something that happens. And so what I've realized, to not only forgive the thing that happened, but I call it the way. That space between where I am now and the thing that happened is what I have to forgive. Right. Whatever it is. It could be, an act of violence or something that took place on 5 years ago or something like that. And here I am now. I'm making this up.
Okay.
But if I'm traumatized by that act of violence, if I'm still hurting, but I've forgiven the perpetrator, what I had to do was forgive that space in between forgive everything that I've felt and I'm struggling with as a result of that incident.
Right.
So I've called that the way.
I love that.
Do you feel that way?
Yeah, because any trauma changes absolutely everything you decide to do after that. You know, the triggers that come after from the trauma, the experiences, the decisions you make. And so it's not just the one or the set of incidences that cause the trauma. It's every decision you make is the way.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, if you're abused as a child, whether emotionally or physically, everything you do after that, your decisions are made based on protecting yourself.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Because you don't want to trigger that childhood trauma.
Yes.
And so letting go of that, it's not letting go of the incident, it's letting go of who you became because of it. And that's everything you believe in.
Right.
Because that's what creates you. My disassociation as a child comes because I experienced so much childhood trauma. That was the only way I learned how to survive through life, by emotionally disconnecting from traumas.
No, that's powerful. I mean, a lot of times I guess because, you know, I grew up with my mom, I always look at, you know, what women take on, you know what I'm saying? Flaws and all, just seeing them from day to day. And it's just like, it's amazing what women in general can just go through from a pain perspective, what they tough out, what they deal with, from interpersonal relationships to physical pain to mental struggles to the worry every day of just, I'm not a worrier. Like, so I don't really subscribe to it, not because I don't want to, but I just don't. And my mom used to always like laugh and be like, baby, I wish I had that gift, because I just can't. And you know, when people worry and concern, like have like deep concern, I look at it as just like a form of love. You know what I mean? And so it just shows you the love that a woman has, that she's more concerned about everything that goes on in this world than even herself. And so when you say that about Shaheen, like, you know, she had to give herself permission to know that she could act in that way or allow herself to feel a particular way. It's just amazing, because it's like, man, that's something that some people need to hear. And so, like you said, everybody's cancer journey isn't the same, but those are nuggets and pieces of advice that may give somebody strength in their darkest time, male or female, or whether they're going through cancer or not. You know what I mean? So
yeah. And to speak to strength, I think a lot of people could feel this way, but then on the other hand, not necessarily. Something she said was, when she thinks about the journey that she was going through, remembering, you know, the moment before she went into surgery, and just how she felt like life is about forgiveness and forgiving herself, you know, or other people if it was necessary. And that she was grateful that she was going through this versus any other member of her family.
see,
Isn't that amazing?
just selfless. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It truly is.
Yeah.
And that's so great that that's on your podcast. Not like saying that superficially, but that's the point of having something where you want to get out your own voice or your own thoughts. So many times, you know, a lot of podcasts are like regurgitated, or they feel the same, or they feel like they're touching on the same subject matter. But that's something that's amazing and evergreen. Like, you know, people can listen to that 10 years from now and take something out of it. So it's a blessing that you were able to get a person as powerful and strong. And it was a blessing that you had the insight to even say, hey, I'd like to have you on for my podcast.
Well, it was a blessing, actually, because I didn't even know her. I know her now, but it was a friend who said, hey, you need to meet this person.
See?
So
That's
that was
awesome.
a blessing. And
That's
like I said,
awesome.
when she came in and she sat down, I was like, oh my God, I don't even have enough time to ask you everything I want to ask you.
Oh, man. So, not to move along or rush along, but you've had a few interviews with family members over the course of your seasons.
You
as I would
included.
say. Yeah, me included, I guess. But we're not going to start with me. So I believe it was on episode 9. You had my wonderful cousin, your nephew, Justin, on.
Yes.
Is there anything, I mean, of course you know him, so, but is there anything about the episode in particular that you learned or that you wanted to reflect on?
Well, what was so great to me was Justin shared a lot about, first of all, his relationship with his dad, my brother Jeff, your uncle, who's no longer living. So he shared about a lot about that relationship, about the loss of him, and how he dealt with that. And he shared the journey of some things that happened with his mom medically, and how he dealt with that, how she dealt with her journey. He shared some things about his own insecurities early, in his 20s. I think he just turned 30, right? He's about to turn 31. Are we right?
Yeah, you're right.
And so this was earlier in his 20s.
Yeah.
And he was just so open and authentic. And then after the episode, he started hearing from friends how they had been in some emotional struggles and serious emotional struggles, and how listening to that episode really helped them.
That's
I mean,
good.
they were in dire situations emotionally.
Man.
And so I just loved that. I love the power of what he was saying and who he is, and that he shared it. And, it is about healing. And I felt like it transcended age.
They were pretty similar, man, in great ways, though. In great ways. Their love was unconditional. Their ambition was above average. They wanted the best for themselves and the people around them. And I think those are just so dope. I can see, how that worked. Yeah, I think what I said was a single mother should never have to raise a son. And I said, she's fully capable of it. And it's been, proven time and time and time. Look at me. I'm a product of a single mother. But there are qualities of a man that a man must teach a man. And, equally important, and there are qualities of, a woman that a woman has to teach a woman. I think there are damaging effects from that not coexisting in one, in one space. Is damaging by that being a limited time as well. There are qualities, of a man, of dignity, of being a stand-up character and a person, that a man teaches a man. And that came at a slower pace due to limited time. And I feel as though it was beneficial in many ways. But there are changes to your growth as a result of that. You know what I'm saying? I think that social imbalance is such a tough space to be in when you're growing through puberty and you're trying to find who you really are, and the person that's genetically your image, is not in that immediate picture. I think they both did an outstanding job, and I'm very grateful. But there are things that I wish I could have had more time to pick up, from my father. But we also talk about timing, there are things I would have never understood until this day. And so, I think the time that I mostly need is now. So what I'm saying that is, it can be done. As far as raising someone, it just creates a social imbalance that is tough to be in growing up as a child. Does that make sense?
It does. And we should let people know that he passed away.
Yes, he passed away.
So what do you think? What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think the world of Justin. I think he's definitely an insightful person, and so, I mean, just going through that at such an early age, I mean, you have to find a certain form of strength, but also you're trying to look for clarity in the same moment. So just him being able to work through that and still succeed was like, cool, because that happened before, Uncle Jeff passed before he was able to graduate college. Like, he didn't get to see that, you know what I mean? And so there's probably things that go on in his day to day that he just wishes his dad could see. And so to be able to, talk about that and talk about other things in that episode, it was just like,
yeah,
he's young, but he's not like a child, you know what I mean?
Right.
But he's young. So like, sometimes you don't figure those things out until later on in life, if ever, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
So another episode would be episode 40. Was with me.
Was that you?
I believe so.
So that might have been the first episode with you. And did you listen back at the episode?
I don't listen to myself.
So I think that's the episode I was listening to, because you've been on, we've podcasted a number of times now.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we were talking about was just how you grew up Catholic. I grew up Catholic.
Yep.
And it struck me, the church that you went to, you're in Virginia, and the church that you went to, I'm very familiar with, because I went there whenever I would visit when my mom was living there, was St. Mary's.
Yep.
And you, at the time, because this episode was maybe 3 years old, at least, I guess. And I think you said the church is 200 years old.
Yes, over 200 years old. It's a basilica. So it's actually the Basilica of St. Mary's Catholic Church. And in fact, I just went past there last week when I took Jack to ODU, and they had a new steeple because I believe it had a church fire and they had to do it. So it's like a very historical church, but it's yeah.
So many memories that I have just coming for Christmas, going there for Christmas Eve, Mass. Just a beautiful church. And something that you brought up, you brought a couple things up, but as far as church went, was just wanting to get something out of church. And I don't want people to think that I'm, down on church. I'm not. I mean, I'm not.
I know you're not. I know you're not.
And but I think that something that used to frustrate me when I would go to church is that I felt like you have a captive audience. The pastor, the priest has a captive audience, and you have so much power, and I mean that in a positive way, to convey a message for people to take with them, throughout the week. And that doesn't usually happen, or it doesn't often happen.
What do you mean, from a Catholicism standpoint, or just like any type of church?
Well, I'm talking in general.
Yeah.
I'm talking in general. And it did get to the point, though. I mean, when I was going to church, when I was going to Catholic church, I would take the message, whether the priest conveyed it or not, everything tied together. You would have different scriptures that would lead up to the homily.
Right.
So that would be one message. And so I would take that message and I would soak that message up.
Right.
And I would pray on that message during Mass. And so, but you had mentioned how you wanted to find comfort in church. Right. And you didn't feel that you were getting that necessarily. And you would ask your mom about that.
I think more so for me, it was the depth of what was going on. So to me, it was like, in Catholic churches, when I was going, we went by the missal instead of the Bible itself. And so the missal would have excerpts and stories from the Bible or stories from that time, which would lead to, you have your first reading, your second reading, you have the gospel, which would lead into the priest doing his homily. And so all of that is fine, because you don't have to necessarily dress it up for me to get what I want to get out of it. But I'm looking at the missal, and then the thickness of the missal isn't half as thick as the Bible. So I'm trying to figure out, like, what am I missing? Like, where's the the lost words? Like, where are they going? Like, is somebody just giving me like the Cliff's Notes of the Bible? Like, what's going on? And so that would lead me to other questions. And, we would go to Sunday school class, and, they would talk about things like a mortal sin or a venial sin, and it was categorizing the sins, which kind of made sense. But then it's like, well, where's this in the Bible? Like, you know what I mean? And so you start to get into that kind of conflict. And that was the main reason why I brought that up to my mom, is it was like, I'm not getting to the root of what I'm looking for. And that's no diss to the religion itself, because what I appreciate about Catholicism was the structure, was the straightforwardness of it all. There's a beauty in Catholicism, and maybe because I was raised that way, but it just appeals to me. But when it comes to the depth of what I want to know when I'm in church, it lacked that. And that kind of, was giving me the purpose of, like, why am I here?
And when you say, so I get what I understand when you talk about maybe in Sunday school, but actually from the missal, couldn't you just go to the Bible because it would tell you where, what the scripture was?
So when you were raised Catholic, how were you raised in it? Were you like put into everything, or did you kind of just like go to church and then as you got older, you started to do certain things? Am I clear with my question?
I'm not sure, but what I can tell you how it was for me. We went to Catholic Mass.
Mm-hmm.
I made my first communion.
Right.
Continue to go to Catholic Mass.
Right.
And
Okay.
then
Okay. So
yeah.
it was similar for me, you know what I mean? But instead of me just going and getting my first penance, being able to take my first communion, of course I was christened, but I was in like the Junior Knights of Peter Claver, which was like a division of the cardinals that go with the Pope. It was like a young boys church fraternity.
I
and
never
I was
heard
like
of that. Say the name again.
The Junior Knights of Peter Claver. It's like you got the Knights of Peter Claver and we were the Junior Knights of Peter Claver.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And so how can I explain it? There's a different structure in how you're taught where there's just a lacking of the Bible. It's not that I couldn't read the Bible. It's not, nobody didn't tell me to read the Bible. It's just like, why don't we read the Bible? You get what I'm saying?
Why don't we read the Bible? Who's we?
The congregation, the church, the religion.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Because I would go to church with my other friends and I would be in a Baptist church and there's a whole different vibe there. And even though I didn't necessarily like the theatrics of it all, at the end of the day, it's like, this is the Bible. Like, you watch, the law, you got to swear it on the Bible. The Bible is on the coffee table in most grandmothers' houses. You know what I mean? And so you're like, well, why don't we read that? And why does my friend's church read the Bible and mine comes from the missal? And in those missals, you could buy like a 15-year missal.
I like those missals.
I'm not dissing the missal. I'm just saying,
I'm not saying you
how am I
are.
going to read this book for 15 years when I go to church and I never have to touch the Bible?
But
it didn't click.
It's so interesting because I went to a lot of different churches of my friends, and at least some of them, I don't know if all of them, like they could have been Baptist or Methodist, but at some of them, I would notice they had the Bible, and I was like, I just thought that was interesting, but I didn't think it was. I thought it was like, oh, they brought the Bible instead of, looking.
So it never occurred to you, like, why am I not reading the Bible?
No, because I read the Bible. So, I thought that they had a missal.
So this is my logic.
In the pew, but they preferred to look at it in the Bible.
So this is my logic, and I follow with them. And I follow what you're saying, right? I agree with that. I thought it was a preference as well. My logic was, I read the Bible too. Like I would open the Bible up, and it didn't feel like the missal. So now I'm like, if you're telling me at church that everything comes from the Bible, then why do I need to go to church if I can read the Bible?
Okay. Why? I'm with you.
And so those were the questions I was asking my mom.
Okay. But I don't know why somebody couldn't answer, because you were mentioning like
no. It's not. It's because what happens in Catholicism, you understand that it's a very structured religion.
Oh yeah, everything's mystery.
And so therefore, I had more than just that question. That's not the question that kills them. The question is, if priests and nuns vow celibacy, and you aspire to be at your holiest, because these are who we look at our leaders, then how will we survive if everybody reached their holiest? If everybody's priests and nuns, how will we procreate? Exactly. Right. I'm asking questions like that in the middle of Sunday school class or Wednesday Bible study class in high school. Like, so what? I gotta pick? And it stumps people, you know what I mean? And I'm not saying that because people have a lack of intelligence. That's not where I'm going with it. I'm saying as a kid, they don't have an answer that I feel is like acceptable. You know what I mean? You're gonna give me your regular answer, but it's like, God ain't asked me to do that, because you just said in the Bible that I read, Adam and Eve, they had some children, but it's not in the missal.
That wasn't in the missal. Well, they did do the Old Testament. In the missal, they would give you readings from the Old Testament before you got to the gospel.
And they picked the ones they wanted. No diss to Catholicism at all.
No. Because for me, I don't practice Catholicism, but it is, I mean, I could easily tomorrow go to the church, down the street, because that's where I feel holiness.
Yeah.
That's one thing that, I feel that it offers.
I agree.
It brings a closeness.
I agree.
Yeah.
I still make the sign of the cross, when I pass a Catholic church, or at least St.
Mhm.
Mary's, you know what I mean? And for the longest time, I used to make the sign of the cross before I said my prayers and after. And I get it. Like, you know what I mean? There's a lot of positives that come with it. It's just very interesting because, that was one of those things where I was just looking for more depth.
Yeah.
And
When
so-
I was living in New York, I went to St. Patrick's all the time during my lunch hour.
Mhm.
And I mean, it could be that I went other times other than my lunch hour, but I would go a lot on my lunch hour and just go and pray or light candles. And there's a name for it. Is it the Pieta, or you might know it, of Mary? It's the statue of Mary.
I know what you mean.
I forget what it's called, but
I
Jesus
forget.
is like,
Yeah.
yeah.
I know which one you're talking about, where you light the
right.
candles, right?
Well, right, but like Jesus is Jesus on her lap, or I
Mhm.
think
Like,
that-
she-
yeah,
like, yeah. I know
yeah.
what
And so that's like if I was really in pain, I would go up to that one. There's a really big one in St. Patrick's, and there's a side you can go on, and you can put like your hand in like Jesus's hand, and I mean, just super comforting. And then there's a chapel, Mary's chapel, and then there's all kinds of places around where you can light candles. And I'm bringing that up only because one of my closest friends was telling me how she was in St. Patrick's not that long ago, and she lit a candle for my mom.
That's awesome.
Wasn't that sweet?
Yeah.
Because, I guess she remembered that, I would be in there, and it's like, I was in St. Patrick's and I lit a candle for your mom.
That's cool.
I thought that was
I mean,
great.
that's the beauty of Catholicism.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The symbolism, the statues, the things of that nature is just like, it is comforting.
Mhm.
Even if you didn't have anything going on, but you got into that environment, it felt like, God was right there. Like,
Yeah.
even the smell of the air in the Catholic Church just feels like, oh, God's in here.
Yes.
Even though he's everywhere. Like,
right,
you know what I mean?
exactly. And people want to say, oh, you're worshiping statues, and that's not what it is.
No, it's not.
You're just trying to be close to God. And
Yeah.
one time I went on my dad's birthday, which is April 6th, and my birthday is April 29th. And I went on my lunch hour, and the priest was saying that his dad died on that date, and his birthday was the 29th.
Oh, wow.
Wasn't that powerful? I mean, I was like, wow, I wouldn't even heard that if I didn't come in here just this
Exactly,
moment.
man. That's when the numbers be numbering. That's what I say. It's like, it's always cool.
Yeah.
In having conversations with people, I realized that a lot of people stress over things that they can't control.
Mhm.
And me, by nature, I was just born, I guess, to not feel that way. Like, if I can't control something, I can't stress or worry about it, because I'm not going to be able to do anything about it. And in my experience, when you say you have a problem today, and you're really worried about it, it's getting you down, it's truly affecting how you operate and move, it's affecting your sleep patterns, how you want to eat, so forth and so on. 2 weeks from now, 9 times out of 10, just putting an arbitrary number on it, you don't feel as bad about it as you did 2 weeks ago. Like, you're over it, you're past it, you've dealt with it, you've coped with it, and you didn't necessarily do anything because you had no control over it in the first place. Time just passed and you were good to go. And I'm talking specifically about those things. Things that you can control, you definitely need to do your best to control. But when you know it's something that you can't do anything about, I suggest you don't worry, and I just don't worry about it.
Yeah.
There's something in your makeup where your thoughts don't overtake you.
Right. And I mean, the way I do that is I focus on other things that are going on in my life at the moment. You know what I mean? So, like, say, for instance, it's something that's going on with my job that I can't control. It's just the nature of the business. Like, we're having layoffs, we're having cutbacks, something like that. Well, I can't do anything to make myself not get laid off, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm performing at a high level anyway. There's very few of us that do what I do. So at the end of the day, if they're gonna cut me, they're just gonna cut me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can't come home with those problems, right? I
Mm-hmm.
can't put that burden on my wife. I can't put that burden on my kids. I can't put that burden on the people that I interact with day to day. So what I do is I focus on what's good with them.
Right.
Like, if there's some happiness, some extra happiness going on in my marriage, I lean into that. If there's some extra happiness or growth going on with my kids, I lean into that. If there's something extracurricular going on that entertains me, I'm a big sports fan. I'm a big fan of technology. Like if there's a big, like March Madness is about to come up. Let's say I'm stressed out at work. When I come home and I watch TV, I'm into those games because it helps me take my mind off of what's bothering me that I can't control.
Right. While we're talking deep, before we go on, I know, see, you're about to go on.
Oh, you good? You're like, no.
Come back. At the time that we talked, and you brought up your mom a few times, and when we talked, that was when you had both of your parents.
Yeah.
And it's been less than 2 years. It's just been a year since you lost your dad.
Mm-hmm.
And that was less than a year before you had lost your mom.
Right.
And so I want to ask you if you have had any awarenesses about yourself experiencing those kinds of losses that you maybe didn't have, because you have such a big sense of yourself.
It's interesting, right? I think I went through the process like anybody else would go through the process. You know what I mean? There's a very deep pit that you feel just like inside you is missing initially when you lose a parent. And when you lose another parent, is no different. I lost mine so close together that things get blurred. They get blurry, which I didn't expect. At times I feel guilt in my grief as far as who I'm supposed to grieve and how I'm grieving them. You know what I mean? Like there's a certain point in time where I feel like, my mom deserves something. And then there's other points in times where I feel like my dad deserves something. You know what I mean? As far as my grief or my sadness. But for the most part, I'm at a point where I look back at them in a happy way. Like I remember them as who they were as people. You know what I'm saying? So it's funny stories that come up that I might talk about with my wife, or Jack was pretty close to my mom, was like very close to my mom. So he brings up a lot of stuff about my mom, or brings up my mom a lot. And so therefore there's a lot of just reminiscing in a good way. But as far as myself, I think I just didn't know how grief hits you in that way. I never lost anybody that like was that close. You know what I mean? When you lose the people that create you, it's almost like you realize that, damn, I've been a child my whole life. And then when you don't have your parents, it's like, I'm not a child. Like I'm a parent. Like I was a parent when my parents were here, but like now I'm the parent. Like all of this stuff that's inside of me is like, okay, I gotta prepare my child for when I pass away. Like, you know what I'm saying? A lot like how
Yeah.
they did for me. I could go on and on, but I mean, that's pretty much the main part. That's the part that's kind of like different, like that you don't expect. You expect the pain, you expect the sadness, you expect the happy memories. You know what I mean? But you don't expect like how you internalize it. You don't expect that like one day you're just off. You wake up in the morning, shit's not right, it's off, and then you're like, all right, whatever. And it could be related to that. It could just be related to the grief in general. And it's not a direct thing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It'll take somebody bringing something up, or you discussing something, or thinking about your parents in a certain way that lets you know that, oh, this is where that feeling is coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just different. You know what I mean? I don't think any human can prepare for that. I think people can only relate, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, if somebody would have told me that before my parents passed, I'd have been like, I have no clue what you're talking about. No, seriously.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so odd.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Losing, you know, like my mom and my dad, your dad, who's my brother, and Jeff,
Mm-hmm.
my other brother, is just each one was so different. And
Yeah.
like when you mentioned blurry, like that's how I felt with losing my mom. Like I just felt, which was after my dad,
Mm-hmm.
but I remember just feeling like, I don't even remember like 6 months, like the 6 months that took place after she passed. I just remember certain things, you know, but everything just seemed like a blur, you know, just.
That was a hard time though.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Looking back at it in retrospect, I mean, I don't say that like it was you know, a burden, but I say it like it intensified as it got closer to her passing. Like that summer for me was even a blur. So I know it had to be like a blur for you, but it was easier for me to see what was going on than maybe you, because you had different stressors that were attacking you at the same time. As opposed to me, I was there to be like a form of relief, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that I used to think, I don't know if I brought this up before, but because my dad passed first and she passed, you know, so many years later, I used to think that losing her, like having no parents, I would feel naked. And I did not feel like that, even though it was devastating not having her.
Yeah.
And then, you know, losing Jeff was very disorienting. You know, it was super disorienting. And because I felt such a balance between Russ and Jeff, you know.
Yep.
And then losing Russ, now I feel what I feel, sort of what I thought I was going to feel when my mom passed.
Right. And that makes sense.
Now I feel kind of naked.
That makes sense.
You know, now I feel like, what the hell, you know, because they're all gone.
Yeah.
You know, he was here, even though we lived in different cities, you know, and I still felt like tethered, you know,
Yeah, for sure.
if that's the right word, you know.
No, that makes perfect sense.
So yeah.
It makes perfect sense. I mean, I look at it that way. You know what I mean? I look at it like out of our clan, you know what I mean, of John and Marjorie, you are the only person that I can look at for that type of wisdom. Like you're it. You know what I'm saying? And as far as like how I look at myself is like, oh, like I'm my dad now. For like who I would like who I looked at my dad as to be like family wise. It's like, oh, okay, like just trying to get an answer, like an understanding or handling of that. Just talking about our small clan, you know what I mean? So I could definitely see like, oh, like you looking like it's me. Like I'm the
like,
one
where's everybody at?
Right. I'm the one that's got to tell y'all all these stories. I'm the one that's got to keep it important. I'm the one that's got to, you know, make sure that people know when they don't know, you know what I mean?
But I am glad that I'm built, or God made me the way that I am, because I feel whether it's dreams or maybe, you know, whoever might visit me in my spirit, like I'll feel that. Like I have pictures of my mom all over the place, you know, but I was looking at a picture of, my eyes fell on a picture of her yesterday, and I felt like I had seen her, like for real, you know, like recently, like we have visited, you know. And I'm glad that, you know, whenever that happened, whenever that visit happened, whether it was in my dream or it was, you know, sometime that I was, you know,
that it felt
in
so
another
recent.
consciousness, you know, that it happened.
Yeah, that's
You know?
awesome.
So, but it's not like I haven't seen my mom. Like on one hand, it feels like I haven't seen her in 50 years, but I probably saw her like a few days ago, you know?
That's funny. That's funny. Oh man, but I get it though. You know, so funny. I was talking to Marley earlier today for the podcast world. That's my stepdaughter. And she was telling me about her dreams. Like she was like, her dreams feel so real that sometimes she just has to ask people or ask like whoever was in the dream, did that really happen or was I dreaming? And I was just like, I
I
didn't say
love
anything to her,
that.
but I
Wow.
was like, that's such a gift that like
Yes.
some people would hear that and just be like, oh, you were just dreaming. But it's like maybe there's a connection to something else that, will manifest itself as she gets older. Just
Yes,
interesting.
yes. Like my girlfriend who I mentioned lit the candle.
Mm-hmm.
I have to tell her, I have to bring this up to her because in the 90s, okay, she was telling me how she had a dream and that this friend of hers, this guy friend of hers was in the dream and that she happened to mention it to him and he had a very similar dream on the same night. Like their dreams were connected.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah,
And so
man.
I can't remember like all the details, but they started having
Yeah.
like this conversation about what was going on in each dream and how they were intertwined.
That's wild.
That is a trip.
Yeah,
I
see,
have
that
to
never
bring that
happened.
up to her. Can you believe I remember that?
Nah, because it's such an interesting thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know me, especially like I tapped out of that dreaming thing a long time ago. So like it has to be something powerful for me to remember it, you
You're
know.
reminding me of something.
No, what's that?
I have to go to my notes.
All right.
So in your podcast episode,
Yeah.
we were talking about energy, and you were talking about how, because I feel a lot of energy, and you were talking about how you see a lot of things. You like I said, do you see yourself kind of like empath kind of? And you said it's more like you see things. And so I couldn't remember, like there's clairvoyance and there's other words. And I couldn't remember what the words were. And so, like you just said, like you tapped out of the dream thing, quite a while ago. And because you know that you have these gifts and you just don't necessarily want to dwell in those gifts because, you got a family and you're a human being and you got to live in this world and take care of business, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And so, but given that you have these gifts, I was wondering like if I shared a little more, what you think your gift is. So there's clairvoyance, which is a vision. I'm going to read them all. And these are just general things. Now I can go to the website, which I do have on my screen, and go into a little more detail.
All right.
But there's clairvoyance where you have like a vision, you see things like, like something's going to happen. You have like the forward thinking vision of how something's going to unfold.
Definitely.
There's clairsentience, which is what I have most of the time, which is the energy thing.
Okay.
Where, you can feel somebody's energy and know what's up. There's clear, can't even read my writing. Clear cognizance, I think I'm saying. I can't read my writing well. I think it's clear cognizance, which is intuition and a knowing. And there's clear audience, where people hear things, which is where they have like, they hear a voice in their mind. I've had that at a different time, different moments. Do this, go here, do that. You just hear that voice in your mind. Do those make sense? I was wondering if there's one that resonates. Is it the clairvoyant?
I'm definitely clairvoyant. And the last one, you said clairaudience. Yeah, that's one that I blocked out with dreaming. So I equate clairaudience to, you ever see people who talk to themselves? It's almost like they're answering that voice that's in their head. I never really liked going that way, but I definitely hear myself, but I talk to myself in my head more than I do answering or just sit there. Like everything is in there. But I definitely would say I'm very clairvoyant. I feel like my son is clairvoyant. I feel like he might have got that from me. It's and the reason why I say that about him is because it comes out in his conversation. His conversation is kind of like me. Like he'll ask you something to see where you're going to go, because he already mapped out in his head that it's going to go a certain type of way. And he's just trying to get that confirmation. And I do that all the time. Like I can see something play out. And where I guess I get tripped up is I was listening to this interview with Charlemagne the God and Ab Soul. And he and I have the same birthday. He was just born 5 years after me.
Absol.
And he was saying that he was talking about his relationship with drugs and the use of drugs. And he was saying he never had a dependency on it. He was like, he just did it because he wanted to. He was saying, but a part of his brain to come out of certain things is he's always been this way. He's like solution based. And that's how I am. It's like, it's a gift and a curse. So for everything that I try to do when I plan something or when I see something, I also try to stop whatever I think is going to happen because I'm solution based, but that's not how life works.
You try to stop the inevitable. Is that what you mean?
Not necessarily the inevitable, but like, let's say I know how you would react to a certain thing, right? So instead of, for example, I can't remember if you wanted my dad to come in town or it was something that you wanted my dad to do and you wanted to wait until
I know
it was the
exactly
right
what you're
time
talking
you would
about.
talk. And I said, I know my dad,
Right.
which I knew my dad.
Right.
And so I stepped in and did
Told
whatever.
Told him, say, hey, this is going to happen. It was going to Virginia for the race.
Yeah. And so
birthday.
it was like, right. So it was like, I knew I had to deal with him a certain way to let him know the importance of what it was and that it wouldn't be a problem. Where it served a good purpose in that regard, it didn't necessarily allow you to have whatever you needed out of that. Do you get what I'm saying? And so that's where the solution thing can come into play, where it doesn't necessarily like work out, because even though I felt like I got what I needed to get done, there was also a part of me that looked at that whole situation and was like, well, I still didn't succeed.
Why not?
Because it didn't give you the opportunity to do whatever you wanted to do. Like I interjected into something, as opposed to if I would have let you do it your way and then somehow, some way it didn't happen, then I would have been like, see, I should have just done it my way. So what I'm saying is solutions don't necessarily lend itself to anything when you're clairvoyant.
Yeah.
Just because you can see a path, it doesn't necessarily make it like you're psychic or telepathic or intuitive or anything. It just is. It's just that gift.
It's a way.
But
It's a way.
Yeah, you still end up in situations where it's just like, oh, okay, well, all right.
Yeah, I think that's. I'm actually have to think on that, like the point that you're making, because I think it's really deep, and I have to think about it. Yeah, it actually makes me think of that. I'm so blanking out that Ecclesiastes in the Bible, where everything is vanity under the sun. That's what it's making me think of.
Yeah.
You know, what really matters.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a part of me that I think I live by, is like, I always try to figure out what's important to what's going on in life, period. Like, right. So it's like, it could be personal relationships. It could be work-life balance. It could be whatever. Like Rihanna just did an interview on the Super Bowl, and Nadeska just asked her, like, that was the lady who was interviewing her. She asked her, like, how is it different now being an entertainer and being a mom? Like, I'm sure beforehand it was just your career. And Rihanna was just like, you know, clearly everything changes because you got, every time you're not spending with your child or you're doing something else to provide, you don't have time with them. And so that's the new currency, is like the time that you spend with your child while, you know, pretty much like while you're on earth. I'm just going into it deeper than what she said, but I totally understood what she was saying. And so that's how I live too. Like, you know, I always joke with you, like when a Pisces is speaking my language, like I get it. Like I get it because it's there, it resonates. And so that's a big thing for me, is like trying to balance what's important, because at the end of the day, like a lot of the stuff that we like trifle over doesn't really matter, even though it feels like it matters so much.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, that comes back to me to, everything is about love, because even if you think about the experiences that you want to have with the people that you love, with your children, I mean, those experiences are about love. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
That's what you're getting out of the experience.
For sure.
Is the love. All right. Well, let's move on. I know we're diverging, but
That's all good.
that was some good stuff. And there was more I even wanted to say.
You're funny. You got to just reflect some more episodes. So you have various episodes where it was just you, primarily.
Yeah.
And I find those episodes to be very interesting, no matter how long or short they may be. It's like, it's such a skill to just be able to talk, and I don't want to say vent, just express yourself. I guess that's what it is. Like, if you were to put a microphone in front of me, I can talk to people, but if you were just asking me to talk, I would be thinking about what I want to say in my head and just not blurt it out, because that's just the type of person I am. And I'm not saying that you're blurting anything out, but just that form of expression that's not planned, it doesn't work for me. Like, I'm not a good freestyler about my internal emotions. I can just riff.
As you're saying that, I'm actually like, am I dramatic?
No, that's not dramatic.
No. The reason I'm saying that is because my mom was dramatic, and I remember one time she came to visit me in New York, and I remember I was in I had a platform bed. I was in a studio apartment, and I'm in the bed, I'm looking down at her, and she's talking, and she talked for like 20 minutes, and I'm looking at the clock behind her, and I'm like, she been talking for 20 minutes.
Hey, listen, that happens to me. No, that's not you. That's not you in conversation. So that's why it's so interesting, because I know you know how to converse. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But to be able to express yourself by yourself.
Yeah.
And it at whatever pace or whatever tempo, and it comes out clear, and it comes out, just raw, but still real. You know what I mean? That's a skill.
Thank you. Well, I think I can't always do that. I can do that sometimes.
I mean, whether it's one take or not.
Right.
You know,
and the whole point of me wanting to do this podcast is I want to be a voice for God. I want to speak to people who maybe need to be reminded that they are loved no matter what they're going through, that no matter what they think they did, no matter how alone they think they are, how horrible they think they are, messed up or inadequate, whatever. I want to be a voice for God, to say, no, that's not true. And you may not feel like anyone loves you, but
That's
God
deep.
loves you.
That's
And so I try to, that's why I try to share some of the things, some aspects of my journey. And, what?
My brain went on a tangent for a second. It's so interesting, because it goes back to something that you and I talked about before, sharing.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And how much sharing is too much sharing, and not personally, but when it involves other people. And that's all I thought about quickly.
And I try to think about that, or I do think about that as
definitely.
I continue on, as we talk, and you want to know, like, what do people want to know? Are they feeling like, that's an overshare or what? But
I don't, when it comes to sharing, for me personally, I'm what I would consider a non-judgmental person. But when you say you're non-judgmental, everybody still judges, right? It's just how you treat the people after you get the information. But I think when it comes to sharing, the oversharing part comes to, like, whoever the collateral damage may be, including yourself. Like you can only feel like you overshare if at the end of it you felt like you overshared, or somebody else was like, you included me in something that you shouldn't have included me in, and therefore that may make you feel like you overshared. Because I just think people want something to relate to, because I don't think anybody is the only person that's ever been through what they've been through, no matter how unique the circumstances may have been to line them up to that particular place. When they get to the end, somebody's been through that too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And so,
And the things that I agree with what you're saying. That's why I, will try to check with, anybody if, beforehand. But I think that, I'm on my own journey. And the things that I just brought up are things that, I have felt at different points in time.
right.
And it's been God who's brought me through. And so, I have an awareness of, oh, I'm not alone. And, and that God wants me to let other people know they're not alone, but maybe I'm not done. I'm definitely not done with my journey. And
Right.
so, as I evolve, and go through things and find my own self, I feel a need to share that and let people know. And, going back to Randy, there was something that he said when he was talking about maybe the pain that he was in, and just how he needed to address that. And it had me thinking about my own journey in the last few years, just like with the pandemic and just different things.
Right.
I'm just coming to even in, the last few days, just understanding my own worth and how people will press you,
Yeah.
and just being able, I got to a point of, where I just was like, I gotta love me.
Right.
I have to love me. And that's been a journey I've been on for like 10 years. And I've been better and better and better at it. But in the last 3 years, I'm one of those people where you're like, you have a big thing about respect, right? And I have a big thing about condescension.
Right.
And one of the things I was thinking about the other day or yesterday was, if I'm like really vulnerable, if I'm like really hurting, and let's say I feel like not strong, and I'm a pretty strong person. And if I'm like in a moment where I'm not feeling strong and I'm feeling really vulnerable, I'm in pain about something emotionally, and then you see that and you pounce on me,
right.
that is going to change everything for me. Like once I stand back up, it's all over,
I know
and
what you mean.
so that's happened to me a few times, and that has made me, in the last couple of years, and it's made me stronger, and just also just recognizing like I'm a nurturer, or like you said, I'm a hard worker. I'm a worker. That's what you said. I'm a worker. So people see you're a worker. Oh, they're gonna have you work.
Definitely. Definitely.
Like just seeing different ways that people will just take advantage of you. And it may just be just because you're there.
Right.
And so me being able to pull back, stand up for myself, say no, just put the stop sign up or whatever, and look at my own worth has been good for me. And think those are the kinds of things I like to speak to.
No, definitely. I mean, that's important. And I remember when you were going through the pandemic, I mean, we were all going through the pandemic, but you were the first person to kind of let me know, like, yo, man, this shit is hard. Like, you're like, yo, and I'm like, yeah, it's all right. I mean, it ain't that bad. He's like, nah, you got a family. You don't know how important that stuff is. You know what I mean? Like, people that you're connecting with on an everyday basis and so forth and so on. And it was like, that's a real revelation. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? In that conversation, I know exactly what I was thinking, because that's my first thought is like, yeah, but I made it that way. You know what I'm saying? And it's not reflective of even like what I'm thinking about in that moment. That's just the first thought that comes to my mind. What I'm thinking about in that moment is, damn, you got a point. But I'm so ready to, like, because my personality is always like ready to correct So I just wanted to correct the thought, like you're like, yeah, but you got a family, and it's like, yeah, but you realize, like I'm
you
trying
made a
real
family
hard.
or what?
No, because you know what happens to me, and I always say this. I always feel like, because, and I think I get this from my dad, because I'm so relaxed about things or chill about things, and I'm cool about things, it looks like it's easy. Like, you know what
Yeah,
I'm saying? Or it just happened to me. Like, it didn't require any effort from Russell. Russell's lucky, or Russell, you know what I'm saying? And I be thinking to myself, like, man, I went through real shit. You know what I'm saying? And
exactly.
so I'm not trying to say that you even thought that, or that wasn't even on your mind at that moment. What was on your mind in the moment was, this pandemic is hard. And in my mind, I'm thinking like, well, what can we do to make it not hard? Which goes to my brain like, yo, I made it this way. But it's like,
Yeah.
life, of course, ain't that easy. And again, that's where that whole solutions thing doesn't work. And it took a while for me to be like, oh, wow, like I really see what you're talking about. And other people would say it. You know what I mean? And there's so many people that look back on that pandemic and they just talk about how like hard it was.
Yeah.
You know what I
And
mean?
life has changed. I
Yeah.
mean, I am just not social like the way that I was. I mean, I live alone and I was very social, even though I needed time for myself.
Right.
I'm not social in the way that I was in the
It changed.
past,
It changed
in
everybody.
2019 at
Yeah.
all. So,
I think that pandemic had a had a really hard effect on my dad. You know what I'm saying? I think that allowed him to slip to a place where he just couldn't come out of it, and whatever was wrong, he just looked at it like, you know what I mean? What's
yeah,
the point? You know what I mean? Not
yeah,
like he was like suicidal or anything like that. I think it just gave him time to make peace with life and what life was about. Almost similar to like what you were saying with Randy. You know, my dad was such a extrovert, and he put so much out into the world that when the world shut down, it was kind of like, well, shit, what's for me? You know what I mean?
yeah,
And then it was just like,
yeah.
well, okay, I got my family, you know what I mean? I could talk to them. But like, man, I ain't doing all this. Like, you know, you talk to him on
Hmm.
the phone, like, man, I ain't going back to work. I ain't
Right,
like, yo, I'm
right.
about to retire. Like, it was like, fuck it. But if excuse me, but if the pandemic never happened, you know what I'm saying? It probably would have propelled him to keep going in whatever way he was going. But that gives you another life path, and that doesn't make it better, or you know what I'm saying?
Right,
Just because you want somebody here doesn't necessarily mean that's the best thing for them. You know?
right. So
So,
true. So true.
yeah. Sorry to get off on that tangent off your
No,
birthday stuff, but it just makes me think, you know what I mean? And that's a testament to how thought-provoking those episodes are, where, you know, you're talking, you're expressing yourself.
thank you.
You know what I mean? And I
Thank you.
I
Thank you.
appreciate it. And I also think that it's a beautiful thing when you say you're looking at yourself like a vessel, you know, for God. And, you know, he's speaking through you in that way when you're sharing these experiences, because they're relatable, man. You know, even if a person doesn't go through it, it sparks some form of thought or something to think about that you can take within life if you're that type of person. And I'm
Thank
that type
you.
of person.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're silly. So, you had a few outlier episodes, which, you know, they're under the Adrianne Murchison umbrella, of course, but not necessarily rooted in spirituality, even though spirituality is everywhere and it's with us constantly and it always affects us in some way, shape, or form. But were there particular episodes like you had one about Cafe 290 that I thought was really cool. That was a special, like, I don't even know how to describe it, but it was such a beautiful video and it was so cool. And it was cool when you told me about the idea, but the execution of it was like even better.
Thank you. And I'm supposed to have a part two that I have, and you have to tell me if you think it's too late for that, or not.
Nah, it's not. It's not.
But so Cafe 290 was a club, a jazz club in Atlanta that was open for 40 years.
Mhm.
And I learned about it in 1981 when I first came to Atlanta. And it just was a part of my life in Atlanta. And I worked there at one point, and you've been there, the whole family's been there. There's
Yeah.
just so many memories at Cafe 290, and it closed, it shut down for the pandemic, and then it reopened, but in a limited way, and it could not survive after it reopened, and it closed in 2021. And there's so many musicians and entertainers and just so many people in Atlanta have memories of this small club. And there was also a sports bar attached to it. And I mean, I was in 290 during Desert Storm. I don't know if I told you that.
No.
Yes. When Desert Storm happened, when they announced that on the news,
Wow.
I was working a full-time job at Dean Witter, and I had a part-time job doing telemarketing. And so at the telemarketing job, they were like, "Oh, it's going to be Desert Storm tonight. We're going to war tonight. We're not going to be going to 9:30 like we're supposed to."
Wow.
So we stopped working at like maybe 7:00 or something like that. And I went to Cafe 290. Don't ask me why. I don't remember, who I was meeting there or whatever.
Hey, you're not going to war. Respect to the troops.
But I went to Cafe 290, but they had the TVs on, and that's where, we were for Desert Storm.
Wow.
And I mean, it was just, I remember just being at work and at another company similar to Dean Witter, and somebody was like, "What are you doing for the weekend?" And I was like, "I don't know." And they were like, "You don't know what you're doing?" And I was like, "No, I mean, because I'm going to 290, and that's what we did, But I had my friends from Buffalo, and we would sit in this one corner, I mean, it's just countless memories.
Man.
And my memories aren't even what is a part of this episode.
Right.
It's everybody else. I really wanted to talk to the owner, John Scatina, and then Joe Gransden is a musician who would do big band music there twice a month, and just people who work there, other musicians who perform there. And it just was a place that, I don't know if there's many places in the US. I know there's others, but you could probably count them.
Yeah, it's
on less than 10 fingers.
That live album was, and still is, incredible. When we put everything on these albums on Cafe 290 Records, so it's a beautiful tie-in. And when we did the live album, Joe had brought in specific engineers to do the job, and we just told him, we want you to make this sound like Sinatra's Live at the Sands.
Yeah.
And take it from there. And they did.
Yeah. Ken Gregory,
right.
He was incredible. He brought microphones, put them all over Cafe 290. So not just the band, but in the back. So when you hear that record, which took place over the course of 2 nights, we tied it into one. It's actually a double album if you buy the vinyl portion of it.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. You can hear the plates clinking and the glasses clinking and the ice and the people kind of chattering in the background. And it's so live and so perfect. It's such a thrill. It's still my favorite recording that I've ever made. It took a lot of editing. It took a lot of time to actually turn it into a project. When you listen to it, it sounds like we started at the very beginning and we did an hour and a half and then the show was over. But because of all the applause and all the, just the different things that happened over the course of 2 nights, the editing process was pretty intense. But Ken Gregory, one of the best in the business, did a great job.
Oh my! And so, is that available on like Apple Music or?
Yeah, it sure is.
That's wonderful.
And I think you could still. I mean, we press the vinyls. We press the.
It's platinum about right now, isn't it?
It's platinum. Yeah, Johnny's got 4,000 of them in his garage. It was fun. It was fun having a vinyl record.
I know.
But it was cool too because they took 2 or 3 of the songs off that record, went to Sirius XM Radio, Sinatra station, and also the Channel 67, the jazz station, Seriously Jazz, I guess it's called. And they played 2 or 3 songs from that record still, because that record's 2005, 12 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of helped. It really got Cafe 290 out there.
Right.
Even more so because that station is heard everywhere.
Right.
The DJ will say, live at Cafe 290, and he'll song. So sometimes, one time I was out there playing in a little golf tournament with Clint and his people, and a couple of people said, hey, tell me about this Cafe 290. Where is that?
Really?
So that portion of it was really, really kind of neat.
No, it was definitely an eye-opening experience because, like you said, of course, you had us as a family go there. You know what I mean, and it created its own memories within that. But watching the piece that you did on it, it was so interesting because I didn't even know all of that, and it was, excuse me, it was just an amazing story. It was so cool listening to how enthusiastic Joe and John were when they were talking about it.
Yeah.
And it was so cool seeing a lot of those photos of people because, I played the saxophone when I was like in 6th grade. And what drew me to it outside of like my mom playing like Kenny G, she was in this band. And in the band, it was like the guys that were in the choir at our church. It was Holy Angels Catholic Church. She knew them and they were like, well, they do a cover band.
Mhm.
And so, excuse me, my mom would sing. She was like the lead singer. And we had a guy that played the trombone, a guy that played the bass, a guy that played the saxophone. And it was so cool when you just see live music, the feeling that you get, it's like no other. So whenever I see that in any capacity, no matter how big or small, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
always cool when somebody plays a musical instrument because I know the passion and the love that goes into it. And so that's what I took from that episode. It was just like, oh, the enthusiasm that they have is just like the enthusiasm I have about somebody who can play. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's
Yeah.
gotta feel great to be able to do that. Like just, you could be a guy that works and does something totally different. Like you could do construction, not to be cliche, but then you could come play this beautiful instrument and just get lost in that. You know what I mean? For that
Yes.
time being, and that's what Cafe 290 may have represented for that person. And like for
Yeah.
you, it created all these different memories. And for me, it created different memories. And that's just the power and a testament to what the establishment was. So,
Yeah. And it was definitely a place where you could go. Like so many times I would go there and just be in a funk before I got there. But that was the go-to place. And then that's probably the place, even though it was small. I mean, it wasn't tiny, but even it was a smaller place. That's probably where I got spoiled about sound because the sound was really good there. And so my expectation is I want to hear good sound. That's why I was talking to you about the Grammy Awards. I was like, oh no, this is not acceptable.
No, it definitely was bad. It definitely was bad. But yeah. Now that makes sense.
Yeah. So if you do listen to it, whoever listens to it, make sure you make it to the end because I thought the end was so cute because they have the Clint Eastwood, part and that story. I thought that was so cute.
Yeah, I didn't even bring that up, but that was the other part about it. It was just like, you have all of these people that traveled through there and all the memories that they may have made from somebody else. It was really cool. It was really cool.
Yeah, a lot of good stories. Stories at Cafe 290 are in the episode.
Yep. So you had another episode 90. It says what men don't cry, and that was when men don't cry. When men don't cry. Sorry.
Yeah.
With Wesley. And
yes.
I definitely thought that was a powerful episode. So what comes to mind when you think about that episode?
Well, this time that we're in, these pandemic times, and it was a few things. Just there's been a lot of deaths in our family, but also I noticed last year in 2022, I was seeing a lot of Black men passing away, and it was tripping me out. And a lot of them were in their 60s. I can think of 2 people that I didn't know, but I saw on Facebook, and they were friends of friends on Facebook. And one person, he had a birthday and he was posting about how grateful he was to be alive. And, he looked great. And just as we all know, people have been leaving us.
Yeah.
And then, a few days later, the guy was gone. And somebody else was posting would post a lot of uplifting posts on Facebook and just things about God. And he actually committed suicide on Valentine's Day. And I was just like, and that's only 2. And I was just like, what the heck is going on? It was something that my friend Wesley would talk about, just what men go through and how women go through menopause, but men, when they get older, they go through, something similar.
Right.
And he had talked to me about that a few years ago. Like, nobody talks about, what men experience. And so I would ask him different questions and he'd say, yeah. And then I said, well, can we talk about some of this stuff? And so that's what that was.
Men have to be very careful because there's a spiral that pressure can bring about a self-destructive downward spiral. I call it the abyss. Once you're in it, if you don't realize that it's gotten a hold of you, you are immediately dragged down.
Is that depression that you're saying, or what do you mean?
I don't, well, for the general public, you can use that word. I despise that word. I also despise that 5-letter word, stress. I try to eliminate those words from my vocabulary because I don't want to give anything place.
Yeah.
That I've watched people do that downward spiral.
Yeah.
That looked at the abyss, fell into the abyss, couldn't come out, and are gone.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
Who couldn't see that darkness.
Yes. Say that again. They couldn't see the darkness.
They couldn't see the darkness.
You mean at first? Do you mean at first? Or you mean at all? Like by the time they saw it, it was too late.
By the time they knew it was dark,
it was too late.
They were nothing but a shell. So they were gone before they physically departed.
Yes.
I gave it a different term. I call it the blue funk. If you're blue and you're disconnected, how can you be disconnected from something? The drum beat of a man's heart, of a woman's heart, of a child's heart, okay?
Yeah.
Is universal. People dance, sing, and rejoice this entire planet. They do. But you don't want to lose yourself because of what our physical minds have perceived as difficulty, as inferiority, as being less than.
As just being plain unhappy.
Yeah. Yeah. If there was a dose of joy and a dose of love that you could give, there's a term that you say all the time, God is love, and love is love, and the power of that.
Yeah, I thought it was a good episode. He said a lot of things that kind of just like resonate with like the way I think and who I am as a person. And it's interesting because I'm hearing it from a person who's gone through more than I've gone through in life. So whenever I can listen to somebody, and I say that way because I just don't want to call somebody old because they're not old. Like, you know what I mean?
There's a 20-year difference between
he's
you
older,
two,
right? He's older than me, but I don't look at him in that way. What I look at it is like this life is a journey, and whatever I can take from people to help my journey be easier, I like to do that. So that's just something that I could listen to and really look at like, okay, maybe I should be aware of this, or maybe I should be aware of that, as I begin to get older, or as I grow older. So
So that episode resonated with a lot of people, and it was just important for me to speak to, what men go through sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard, I don't consider myself to be a person who shares his vulnerability. And it's so funny because a lot of men think that's like crying, but I don't think vulnerability is crying. So I never have a problem crying. My vulnerability is expressing to people what I think in the moment. Like, I don't like telling you what I'm thinking in the moment when I'm sad or hurting or frustrated. I like to tell you after I've come out of it. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like, it's interesting when a person can get vulnerable, even if it is in retrospect, even if he did come out of something, but there has to be some point of you reliving that's vulnerable too. And it's just,
it's so funny that you're bringing that up, because what you're saying, what you're resistant to,
mm-hmm.
has me thinking of nonviolent communication. I'm not sure if I brought that up to you before, but I think I have. And that is exactly, nonviolent communication speaks to exactly what you don't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's using words to reveal what you're feeling. And that helps the other person to connect with you.
Mm-hmm.
So like if I'm feeling sad right now, like that, you know, I'm really hurting right now. I feel sad as a result of whatever is giving you insight, you know, or, you know, that's really, I'm trying to think of some words. Like they have like a whole list of different words that can really like go deep into what you're feeling.
So
and
so I can explain my thought process, right?
Yeah.
So I grew up as the only child, even though I'm not an only child. And so therefore, a lot of things that happen, I just had to deal with myself. Like I didn't have a brother or a sister to just go tell it to. So it was like, all right, work it out in my mind, right? So my issue with it is similar to what you just said. When you're going through something and somebody pounces on you, that makes you mad. Like, you know, when you come out of it, it's everything is different.
You mean like when I was saying, like if I'm vulnerable and somebody pounces?
Right. So what my problem is I have a problem with the way that people acknowledge my vulnerability. And if I'm vulnerable with you, then that means I care about you. And so if I care about you, I don't want to give you the opportunity to let me down. So that makes me not say anything in that moment. It's like, if I tell you this and then you don't respond the right way.
Right.
Now I'm upset that you ain't respond right.
No, I feel that.
And so that's a big crutch for me. It's like maybe if I grew up with somebody and was always able to spill my feelings, then it would be easier for me to do so, or I would trust more. Because it's people that I trust. It's not like I can't tell anybody. I don't have that hurdle. The hurdle is I don't want somebody to mess it up when I say it.
You know what's so funny is I sometimes used to feel that way about God. Like, okay, I'll trust God like 85% because, you know, I don't know if I can handle if I trust God 100% and he lets me down, then I don't have anybody if I don't have God. And it took my friend Carla to bring that up to me.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
That's interesting. I don't look at God that way.
Yeah.
I don't look at him.
I don't anymore.
I don't look at him like he or God.
Yeah.
I say he because of Catholicism. See,
right.
But I don't look at God that way. I it's hard to explain, you know what I mean? But it's almost like you know how we as humans have free will, you know what I mean? God wants us to have free will. And so therefore he doesn't make you do anything, right? So therefore it's kind of like this journey that we're on in life is not to be interfered with in that way, right? Like you can't, like, okay, death, for example. A lot of people, you might hear them say, I was angry with God, right? And I just always thought to myself, like, but why when you know it's death? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, or I'm angry with the person. It's like, but it's death. Like, you know, the only time that plays a role into my mind is like suicide, respectfully. That person took their own life. But in other circumstances, I always look at it as like, well, that person ain't necessarily want to die either. Maybe. You know what I mean? So I can't be mad. So I look at it like God just doesn't interfere in that way, but he's always there within you. I keep saying he, but
no, but
you know what I mean? It's the essence of everything is like life is supposed to feel like the way it feels, right? You know what I mean? You can't put that kind of blame or onus or anything like that. You know what I mean? Like it's almost like in the movies, like when somebody's doing something horrible and they were like, if God is here and blah, blah, blah. Like, it's like, no, dog, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. We have more power than we think and
Right.
control than we think. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So in episode 89, you did For the Culture with me and Charles. Now, but you did a For the Culture episode with Charles first, right?
Yes, that was part one or the first For the Culture episode where I wanted to address, because we're from different generations.
Mhm.
Charles Gilbert is in Chi.
Yep. That's right.
His podcast right now is In the Meantime, but he has several podcasts.
Mhm.
And we did a podcast when I was in Buffalo For the Culture, because we're from different generations, and I wanted to address, what is this when we say culture, what do we mean? Because I didn't want to feel excluded and it just be the hip hop generation.
Right.
And so we did that. And then you had the idea of doing another part to that, which
Mhm.
I thought was really good, where we did, we talked about culture around Kendrick Lamar's video.
Yeah.
I always say the title wrong. So you say the title.
What you mean, the Heart Part 5?
Yeah, I always say
okay.
Heartbeat. Something, but that's why I wanted you to say it, which is a phenomenal video.
Yeah.
And so we were able to dive into culture. And the whole thing is, I was realizing that I always say that I'm not a hip hop person, and I am uncomfortable saying anything other than that.
Right.
However, I do have to acknowledge that, there's a lot of hip hop things that, I'm into in the last few years, from podcasts to different music. And in fact, who I'm like,
I know what you're about to do.
I love it right now. I was like, I gotta tell little Russell, like, this is the beat I want my podcast is Nori. Like, I love to listen to some Nori right now, man.
That's my
Loving
guy.
listening to him. So.
That is funny.
Yes, he comes on and I just start moving. I just start.
Nori from Queens, from Left Rack.
Yep. So anyway, that was really, really a really good episode to me.
Yeah, I thought it was a great episode as well. Because that song is just so powerful. Even when I listened to it, I probably listened to it last week. It's just so many nuggets in there. He's just such a insightful person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's
Kendrick Lamar you're talking about.
Yeah, Kendrick Lamar. It's just amazing what hip hop has turned into. And it's so interesting. I know even in that episode, you were referring to like how you were so turned off by hip hop back in the day because of the misogyny, because of the violence and things of that nature. And that was just what was perpetuated. But, growing up in hip hop, we accepted the good with the bad. And it's so cool to be able to see like the good shine, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And people will be able to take things from it. So
yeah,
I definitely enjoyed that episode.
Hip hop is like love, right? It's culture is like love. It's an abstract thing. You can't necessarily put your hands on it. You can't really define it, but you know what it is when you experience it, right? We are hip hop, as he said. That is it. We were raised on hip hop. Like, we were raised on the music of our parents, but the music that we picked as a culture, as a generation, was hip hop. So all of the elements and the things that we learned as kids, that's what started getting implemented into the real world, And there's certain things that people don't even realize that they do in everyday culture that comes from hip hop. When you say yo for any reason, it's hip hop. When you say dope for any reason, it's hip hop. When you say word for any reason, it's hip hop. You know what I mean? That doesn't.
Yep.
That's all. Like, the reason why hip hop is so strong is because it's words. It's poetic. It's our form of communication. It's the reason why the Wu-Tang Clan can get all of their influence from kung fu movies, rap in English, go to Japan, sell out a show, and people know it word for word, but don't speak the language. You get what I'm saying? That's how it's abstract in the form of love. So hip hop is everything to us because we are hip hop.
I know we have to wind down, and I want to make sure that we include the there was some episodes around after George Floyd,
Yeah.
just trying to understand how Black men felt. And even after Ahmaud Arbery, it was just real. That was one of those solo episodes I did where I was just so upset because I felt around race that it really comes down to, just people caring. Like, this just comes down to humanity and one person caring about another person. And that's the only way I think we're going to get anywhere in the world is if we really give a damn about somebody else. We can't like talk you to death, about what we think you ought to do. We have to care about each other.
Yeah, no, definitely. Ahmaud Arbery was one of those ones that hit home because he died on my birthday, even though it wasn't reported until, it didn't make news, like major national headlines until after the fact. But, and then his birthday was on the birthday of my grandma Ray. And so it was just so interesting how, like, people, that's one of those things when the numbers be numbering, something will hit your spirit a certain way.
Yeah.
And, like as soon as I heard that story, we're runners, he was running, so it just resonates like, yo, I'm going out for a run. You're thinking about 50 million other things besides your life. You know what I mean? And the world is a dangerous place. But when you're going out there to run, you're worried about having a good run. Did I wear the right attire? Do my shoes feel right? Is the weather good? You know what I mean? Is this a good run, a bad run? The route you may want to run. There's so many things that come into play. And then just to be blindsided and attacked in that manner, it's just so hard to, hear about and let alone see the footage leading up to it and everything. It's just a sad thing. You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So I just am grateful for you doing this with me.
I'm happy. I'm happy I was able to do it. We talk all the time. So the talking part wasn't hard at all, but it's definitely cool being able to reflect. I'm so proud of you. It's a great podcast. It's a great premise. I always tell you that I think it's such a unique idea. Not like you're the only person, but the way that you do it is you. It's authentically you. And whatever you want to talk about, I know you're going to bring some form of positivity and light. And that's the goal that you have. Even if you're talking about something negative, you're trying to get to a point where people can feel positive or people can take something away from it. And I get that out of your podcast. And I hope everybody else that listens does too.
Thank you. Thank you. And I have to say, I have a need to say that today I was, when I was praying and meditating, a revelation that I've been having going back to like, being a worker bee kind of sometimes, is that I don't, sometimes I just don't have the bandwidth to podcast, like I have the bandwidth in the morning, but by the time I'm finished with work, even if I'm finished, in the afternoon, it's like, oh God, I don't have the bandwidth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, I feel that God is telling me like, figure that out, work that out. And when I was doing my meditation today, I really felt like I was saying, I want you to podcast and I'll figure out everything else, meaning him.
Yeah.
I'll figure out everything else out. I want you to podcast.
That's right.
And so, and I literally said out loud, I hear you.
That's real.
And part of the reason, that I felt that was because of just how much I love doing it. I love having the conversations, about God and just the authentic stuff that resonates.
Yeah.
So
you got to chase it. And like you said, when you get those messages, those are the ones that you have to, dive into and be 100% committed and trust and know he won't let you down. But seriously though.
That's right. That's right. Well, John Russell, how do you want to be referred to? I was thinking about that. I was like, what
are you talking about?
Like Russell, John Russell.
Well,
John,
what's so funny? What's so funny about that? I think everyone gets confused because most people don't use their whole name. But I'm one of the very few people that use my whole name. If somebody calls me John, I'm comfortable. If people call me Russell, I'm comfortable. If people call me Murch, I'm comfortable. You know what I mean? So
What do you say
I
your
mean,
name is, Russell? When people say, "Hey, my name is Mark," what do you say?
it depends. If
On
I
the
meet you in a professional setting or a school setting, I'll say John. If I meet you in a like a relaxed setting, like say for instance, if you introduced me to somebody, I would say my name is Russell
Okay.
because that's how my family refers to me.
Right,
And
right,
so it
right.
only got blurred because I met my wife at work. So like she knows me as John, even though everybody doesn't call me John.
What does she
And
call you? I didn't know that. Does Faye, who Faye is not
Faye's family will call me Boom. Like Marley calls me
right.
Boom, and then her mom will call me Boom. Sometimes her sisters will call me Boom, but they'll call me John. You know
What
what I
does
mean?
Faye call you?
Babe.
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
that's what we call each other.
That's so sweet.
Call each
So
other
she
babe.
never calls you by your given name, one of your
She,
5
she'll
given
re-
names.
she'll refer to me as she'll call me Boom. She'll say Boom. She'll say John. You know what I'm
Okay.
saying?
Okay,
Like,
cool. Like my mom called my dad June.
yeah, it's like that.
She never called him John or John
Right.
B. Or yeah,
It's
okay.
wild, man. And I called him Goose. Crazy.
And
That's
I didn't
crazy.
realize till I should edit this out. But he died after I realized why people would call him June. I was like, why people call him June?
Ah,
People call him Uncle Junior, you know.
yo, you are
Like,
hilarious.
why do people call him June? I don't know, but I accept it.
What you thinking of the month?
I just no, it couldn't be that because there was no E on it.
Right. It shouldn't be.
Called him, they called him
It's not
June.
supposed to be.
You know, it was just yeah.
That's funny. That's funny. That's funny.
So, well, thank you so much.
No, you're welcome.
Oh, thank you for joining us. I hope that you enjoyed that. As I said earlier, please share Let's Start Healing with at least one person that you know who you think this would resonate with. And please subscribe. It has been a joy to produce this and bring it to you. Until next time, let's start healing.